Hi, my name is Benedict. Relatively quick video, I guess. Never know what they're going to be. I made a video a couple of days ago, the green one, and didn't even promote it. And it's got a little bit of traffic and some nice engagement, and some requests for some similar sorts of things. And I'm in between jobs. Actually, I got a job, but I just don't want to start it till tomorrow. So I thought might as well show some more similar sort of stuff. A lot of times people have difficulties in trying to get their music to come across as special, is, assuming they've actually written the music properly, because there's a lot of stuff that's not written properly, which is frustrating because you're not making the most of what you got. But when people want to do their own mixing, which is, bully for them, good on them, but the problem is they don't take the extra time, and they don't necessarily even realize that they need to be taking the extra time to make each of those elements magical in its own way. Otherwise, you end up with a pile of flat, and, well, the result is flat. And you're not giving people the reason to be like, oh, because those great records that last, that sound great 20, 30, 40 years later, there is huge magic in them. And these are the techniques that help you put magic into things. Just looking at one sound and a couple of layers. The sound that we're going to end up with is going to be a lot like this one, because that's where we're starting. And it is deliberately a pretty simple sound. The only reason I'm using Surge in this instance is because for some bizarre reason I thought, I'll open Surge using the Cushview element thing, probably in some sort of reaction to trying the waves thing and discovering that it wouldn't let me do this at all. I do like Surge, but it is a pain getting it into Reason. But we're not talking about Reason VST3 issues, but there is the solution here. So let's get this fella out of the way. We're making this sound beautiful. And I don't care whether that's something that appeals to you or not. It's what I refer to as when a sound becomes magical. It has a real presence and something that makes it feel like it moves. If we take off these layers of beautification, it just sounds like, well, a Casio or something. It doesn't sound like it has any kind of magic. We need to build these things in a few layers. One of the problems is, and I have been guilty of it myself, is that we go one of two ways. We either go, well, I'll just do it quickly and pile on. And of course, it is still pretty darned flat. Or we go the other way, which is putting in like 47 different devices. You'll note here there is no EQ happening. There is no EQ here at all. Nor will there be any EQ happening here, because it's not an EQ thing. I've made videos on EQ. Look for the one with Baphomet's statue, showing you how amazingly powerful EQ is, and that it does some of the similar things to what we're doing here. Number one is, of course, use a send reverb. So a send reverb would have this reverb sitting over here, send, and that's return. And I will start my mix by setting up my send reverb space. This is the room, the sphere, the space in which this piece that I'm working on is going to happen. There is no piece here, so it doesn't really matter where I put it. But I see people overdoing reverb. And that's a problem. There's a video coming out in the Higher Hertz channel on reverb soon. This is actually something that I built and finished off as a result of that program. If you're wondering what's that, why has that appear? So that's why I've got this and I'm playing with it at the moment. Reverb adds certain something, but we don't get that magic. So we look at a couple other processes. A common thing is that people will put in a delay. And that's nice. Because we've now got a sense of depth of place. Delays are not just about getting an obvious slap back and obviously doom, 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 doom kind of a thing. That's a purpose for delays, and I do like using my echoes to add a kind of movement, a groove to what we're doing with sync off. But the main purpose of delays is to extend the space that we're in. So that helps provide movement for that sound, and there is no one particular length that echo should be. Hence part of my don't sync, because most delays that you turn on these days are already set to 3/16, and so that just becomes a default. Everything you listen to, the echo is 3/16 away, which means that we are very good at turning off a 3/16 echo because it never moves. It's too perfectly in sync with everything. It's irrelevant. So we probably want to make our echoes move. Another layer that we've got here, and we'll switch this out, is Multiplier. Now you'll notice both of these are actually doohickeys that I built. Oh, better go rescue them. Sorry about that. I thought I'd pulled them over. I'll try to pull both of them back in one go now. Both of these are things that I built for higher hertz. They are both freebies over at higherhertz.com. So it's not like I'm showing you something that you can't do yourself. This is a bit of a funny one, and I've seen a few people picking up and going, oh, new, free, this, that, and the other, and kind of missing the point for what it's about. Yes, you can use this to do big, wide choruses, and that's what most people will do. They will go, okay, well... And while this sound is now big and chorusy, let's put in it doesn't actually have a lot of unique character or beauty. It's just big and wide. So let's look at what this was really designed to do. More than anything else, it's designed to be used like a saturator is a sub-distortion, which adds this sparkle. This is like a sub-chorus, a sub-flanger, a sub-reverb that adds a little bit of interest by making the frequency plot of our sound, our donor sound, non-linear, which is what happens when we get into this sort of territory, because we start noticing that every key is likely to actually have a slightly different sort of frequency balance. When you do it hard enough, badly enough, and then you might have one note that just suddenly resonates and screams. While that's not what we want to do, using what causes the beginning of that is actually a really powerful thing, because now, rather than every single note sounding perfectly the same, we've got movement in those notes. And it's not about making a chorus. We want to keep those so that we don't necessarily notice it until we turn it out. And we go, oh, that's rather flat and samey. This has now developed a sense of character, like somebody is scratching at their viola in front of me. Not that I'm trying to create a viola here, but that it feels more like it has a place, a presence. And we want to do that only just a little bit, so that when it hits the reverb, rather than being a flat sound with a flat reverb attached to it, we've got this moving sound, which means that the reverb is moving as well. And this reflects a real room situation. Let's say we had gone to see Chopin playing his piano in a room. Let's say it was the most perfect room everywhere and the most perfect version of Chopin playing Chopin, because of course it's Chopin playing Chopin. But are you going to sit there with your head perfectly still the whole time? You know, like Clockwork Orange, like you've been strapped in. No. You're going to sit there and your head is going to move whether you're aware of it or not. Whether it's because you're looking at the lady 3 seats down going, hello, or whether it's you're looking, going, oh, ooh, what Chopin's shoes look like this week. See, we're moving our head all the time. And those little movements are things that we're not really aware of or definitely not thinking about. Even if we think we're sitting still, our heads move. I have what's called a mild essential tremor, as in my head shakes. You notice it, no doubt. I sort of do this with my head. That means that my ears are constantly getting a slightly different version of what's coming back from that room. And this sort of process actually duplicates that. So rather than the sound being really flat and samey, it's now moving around as though there's that little bit of movement in the room. Because even if my head were strapped in a Clockwork Orange kind of way, chances are that other people in the room are moving. And as they move, the nature of that room, the feedback from the room, changes. And the room is always as much of an instrument as is Chopin, his shoes, the keys that he's playing on the piano that he's playing. So we need to create this constant sense of movement. And this is a way of doing it because we're bringing back in reflections, which actually change our frequency plot. So we get some enhancements of certain frequencies, some disenhancement of certain other frequencies, and our sound seems so much more mobile. Notice that there's a big leap in the sense of beauty around this sound. If you don't hear it, don't feel bad. It's a thing that takes you a little while to learn to hear. But also don't feel bad because it may not be that you are designed to hear this kind of stuff. If Mark Knopfler and I were given exactly the same guitar, exactly the same amplifier, the same little pick, who's going to do better guitar stuff? Sadly, not me. Why? Because there's something about the way God built Mark Knopfler to make him so much better at guitar stuff. But if Mark Knopfler and I lined up at a mixing console, it's entirely possible that the results that we get, same mixing console, same pro plugins, it's entirely probable that the results that we get will be, oh well, better luck next time, Mark. And Mark will be smart enough to go, yeah, I'm built to play guitars. And do that funny droning singing that I do, which is really very good. So if you're not getting it, don't necessarily feel bad about it, but you will notice that when you listen to particularly aspiring indie bands, you tend to feel, it's a little bit like it's not Roxy Music's Avalon, or it's not David Bowie or whatever, and it's not about the level of gear that they've got. It's about that everybody on those records was focusing on what they're good at. You know, Brian Ferry is writing words and singing them, or crooning them. Andy McKay is... and mix engineer is mixing. Rhett Davies was the producer. I'm not sure offhand whether he was mixing. Doesn't really matter. But this is why you hire a mix engineer, to bring this level of detail. Sadly, a lot of mix engineers are just, well, they've got a door and now they've announced to the world that they're pro. They don't have the skills or experience yet. If you're going to do it yourself, you've got to give yourself these skills or experience so that when people hear you work, they feel that magic. So adding in the delay now, probably should have put them in a combinator for quick offness. This sound that would probably not excite many people at all. Nothing against Surge, I actually really like the way Surge sounds. But the single biggest move is actually in this. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have Multiplier, it's just I built it specially for this, because I was already doing these kinds of things using the Echo and special delay units that I built for myself, and flanges, so using the flanger that comes in the new sweeper, so that it's a phaser, a flanger, and a filter. I was already using those sorts of things, and I've shown videos on them, but that's the single biggest adder here. So it adds a little bit of space around that instrument before we go anywhere. Delay gives it space in the room. So it has a sense of beauty already before it's hit the room. Now when it hits the room, we've got this tremendous beauty. And if we can turn these off, just the room alone, kind of nothing special. But as we bring in, hear how that reverb improves tremendously. It becomes more vibrant. This is what a true mix engineer is supposed to be doing, not just finding the perfect knob to put to 48 and then going, master it, and we're good. This is what you got to do. And if you don't do these things, fair enough, you can call it a guide mix. You can release it. There's nothing against you doing that. But just, thank you. But just understand that when you're going out there to compete with work that has been done by experienced, seasoned mix engineers who are saying, what is the scene? What's the story? How do we make each element in here not perfect, because that's just wrong, because that would be, oh, well, that's perfect because that's exactly the recording, and then coming up with some weird idea to say, oh, well, we need to EQ out the resonances. Oh, look, there's a resonance there, that's evil, nobody likes that frequency. Oh yes, we better get rid of that. That's the kind of weirdness that we don't want to do. Because I said there wasn't going to be EQ, but it's a thing I see too often. See, all we did was gut that sound. Okay, maybe it sounds nice in solo, and maybe it works in the mix, but unless we're making decisions in the mix, if I want that to seem bright and forward and cheery, I want it to seem sort of more cello-like, I might do something like that. But these are all decisions that can only be made when you're deciding how does all of this come together. There are no specific tools that you need for doing this. This reverb, if we look inside it, is just a collection of pretty stock devices. I've just used this to resolve some issues so that I can minimize and control how much delay time I'm using. Otherwise, this is all bog standard stuff. We can describe very different rooms. And this is something the mix engineer really needs to do. There's just far too much of the, oh, well, I'll get the pro reverb and the pro preset that has the name matching my thing, the pro death metal preset, and you turn to that because you're doing death metal this week. And then it becomes thoughtless. We've got to really put the time and energy into saying, how does this suit the sound? Does it suit the sound? Yes, no. So the trick is to be building the right kind of sound for where you're going. See, despite having the size, we've also built an intimacy. Even though we've got a bigger room, we've got a greater feeling of intimacy here. As well as changing some of the timbral feel. If we want to put some more bottom end back in, this is all part of what you really need to be doing when you're doing this stuff yourself. Because if you're doing it yourself, you have to do it fully. Because when your listener is listening, they're not, well, they shouldn't be just other people in groups and forums who really are actually trying to compete with you and therefore want to make you feel bad so that you go away, leaving them the stone sticking out of the mud and therefore apparently heroic. The real people who should be listening to you are people who are going, oh, well, I'm currently listening to Roxy music or Bowie or whoever is relevant for a fan of yours, and to flip to yours and yours be not necessarily the same quality, because a lot of money spent on Roxy's Avalon, but to have the same quality of beauty in it, of grabfulness. If we had a flip from, let's say, Roxy's Avalon to a Ramones record, they are different things meant to elicit different responses, but the Ramones records were always very high quality. You may be able to say that their fidelity was low, but that was deliberate. The quality of what was done, everything really lined up to make a Ramones record, a Ramones experience. You've got to make sure that everything lines up to make a whoever you are experience, and that's all in these details. And again, if you don't see or feel them, that is okay. That's where you move out and you get a mix engineer. If you go, well, I don't have a budget for it, let's look at the what's called opportunity cost. Whilst I'm sitting here, I can't be surfing. Whilst I'm surfing, I can't be sitting here making a video for you. Okay, surfing's fun. Well, not for me because I can't do it. But the thing is, I can't be making a living. Just as me making this video means that I'm not actually earning the living that I, well, probably will earn tomorrow from doing the client job there. So if you choose to say, well, I'm going to do all this on my own, but I'm going to not really do it at all, what's the opportunity cost? Okay, yes, you might have saved some money, but how much have you lost in terms of fan engagement by delivering something that doesn't feel as Roxy Music as Avalon, or as Ramonesy as a Ramones record, or as whatever, King Diamondy as a King Diamond record, whatever, anything that you see as truly great, you need to deliver that. And that's not in just setting knobs in a particular place, it's in working out what makes this Ramones record Ramonesy, and that Roxy Music Roxy-ish, or a Bowie record Bowie-ish. And this is all just in these details of lining up our elements so that our sound goes from flat but maybe correct to having a real presence and a real beauty in the mix and the context, which we don't have here. That's about it. If you have any questions about the process, ask them on down below. Far more, if you are interested in having this sort of layer of work come into your process, please follow links, have a look at who I am, what I do, how I work, and approach me. If budget is an issue, that's fine. I understand these things, and I have ways of making less go further. That's what all of this is about. Notice that initial synth sound, it is less, but I've made it go an awful lot further. We have ways of doing that once we can understand what your story is and what your budget is. Let me know what your budget is. Give me everything I need to know, and then we can look at how to help you tell your story, how to build the magic based on what you do have. Most importantly, have fun, have a great day.